Part 45. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 441. In the imperial study room of the imperial palace of the Great Zhou dynasty, Rong Chuxiu, who received a letter written by Empress 11 Qi, narrowed his eyes and looked at the letter with a thoughtful expression. Ziki wants to join forces with Zhou. The young prime minister's eyes fell on the letter in the emperor's hand. Her Majesty the Queen is a person who can see the situation clearly. I see no reason to refuse. No reason to refuse. The emperor asked Chuxiu to put down the letter, not because he had no reason, but because he couldn't refuse at all. He has not forgotten that his imperial uncle who abdicated the throne to travel around the mountains and rivers visited Ziki in person the year before last and recognized this little girl from the Ziki royal family as his adopted daughter. Although there must be some mystery in it, the mystery is not important anyway. It's not something a mortal like him can understand. Rong Chuxiu thought for a while and ordered, "Send the prince over." Yes, the personal manager hurriedly went to deliver the order. Rong Chuxiu stroked his chin. Dazhu and Ziki join forces to deal with northern Xinjiang. This war can be won easily without any suspense. Let's take this opportunity to let the prince go out to earn military merit and win over the morale of the army. What do you think of this idea? The young prime minister smiled and said, "Your Majesty is wise." Indeed. Although His Highness the Crown Prince is unparalleled in resourcefulness and both civil and military skills, his lack of experience does have some shortcomings, especially now that all countries in the world regard military force as the top priority, and the kings of all countries are people who are proficient in military strategies and strategies. The Crown Prince cannot be inferior to others in this aspect. After a while, a man who was over a year old arrived at the royal study room. He had a handsome appearance and a straight posture. He was dressed in a prince's python robe and was particularly calm and cold. His natural demeanor was gratifying. The young man was Rong Jing, the prince of the Zhou dynasty. He looked like a dragon and a phoenix, and was naturally noble. After saluting, he said calmly, "Father, have you summoned your son?" Well, Rong Chuxiu handed him the letter. "Look at this." Rong Jing took the letter and looked at it carefully, her eyebrows slightly narrowed. Rong Chuxiu took this opportunity to look at his son again, and the more he looked at him, the more satisfied he became. Among his sons, only Prince Rong Jing was the closest to his uncle Rong Yu in terms of demeanor and charm. Of course, the comparison is definitely not comparable. Even though his uncle had left Dezhou 30 years ago, he was still a legend that could not be surpassed by the Dezhou royal family. He was as wise as a demon. As long as his son could have even one or two similarities, Rong Chuxiu would be particularly satisfied. Empress Ziki is not a warlike person. Rong Jing read the letter and pondered for a moment. At least from the more than a year since she took the throne, she has done better as an emperor than all previous emperors. Rong Chuxiu hummed, non-committal. But I heard that she is not a person who allows others to bully her. She will not sit still and wait for death when northern Xinjiang provokes. However, Ziki's current national strength is not enough to support the war with northern Xinjiang. Rong Jing said, even if they win in the end, Ziki's own losses will also be huge. It has only been less than 2 years since Empress Ziki ascended the throne. Although the country's strength has improved over the past year, it will still take longer to slowly clear away the long-standing abuses. The places that need to be cleaned up must be cleaned up, and the officials who should be cleaned up must be cleaned up. One scientific examination is not enough to select enough talents. Even if the selected students are all capable ministers and generals, it will take a long enough time to train and gain experience before they can slowly replace the incompetent officials in the court. The adjustment of the official mechanism between North Korea and China cannot be completed in a year and a half. At present, Ziki cannot actually withstand the turmoil and economic losses caused by the prolonged war. If my father has ideas about the northern territory, I think the decision to join forces with Ziki is feasible, he said, but we need to make a gentleman's agreement in advance. If there is a pincer attack from the east and west, whoever captures the city will belong to whom. There is no such thing as equal division. The young Prime Minister spoke at the right time. A gentleman's agreement is actually not easy to keep. Rong Jing was silent for a moment and nodded slowly. The Prime Minister is right. If we send people to negotiate with Her Majesty Queen Ziki now, the long journey will be time-consuming and labor-intensive, and a long period of time will inevitably be wasted. It doesn't matter whether a gentleman's agreement is fulfilled or not. After all, whoever conquers the city belongs to whom. This is an unwritten rule. Empress Ziki will not deny this, Rong Chuxiu said calmly. Besides, although she is a woman, but from the news I have heard over the past year, I can tell that her mind, magnanimity and courage are not weaker than those of any man, and she should not do anything dishonest. Rong Jing nodded slowly. Yes. So you think an alliance is feasible? Rong Jing still nodded. It's feasible. What if I ask you to lead the troops to the border in person? Rong Chuxiu looked at the prince. Are you willing? Rong Jing was stunned for a moment, then frowned. Qi Hanyi's cavalry is suitable for breaking new ground. Father, don't you believe him? It's not that I don't believe in Qi Hanyi, but I want you to follow me to the battlefield for training, Rong Chuxiu said calmly. You are the future king of the great Zhou dynasty. A harmonious relationship between the king and his ministers will be good for you in the future. Rong Jing closed her eyes and pondered for a moment. My father thinks so, and my son is naturally willing, but... Just what? A strange color flashed across his eyes, and Rong Jing shook his head. It's nothing. If my father has already decided, then I will prepare now. Rong Chuxiu nodded. Go. The young Prime Minister then resigned. I will go with His Highness the Crown Prince. Rong Chuxiu waved his hand. Go. Walking out of the imperial study, the young Prime Minister quickly followed the prince and said respectfully, Your Highness, what do you think? I don't have any special ideas. Rong Jing was silent for a moment. For Han Yi, this is an opportunity to leave home in an upright manner and make contributions. I am happy for him. Prime Minister Mingzi looked up at the blue sky. Although he has the opportunity to leave home, he will have to come back sooner or later. His achievements and power cannot change his origin. There is nothing wrong with his origin, Rong Jing said solemnly. He is the only legitimate son of the Qi family, a general in charge of the military power of the Great Zhou, and also my capable general in the future. I will not let anyone bully him. Mingzi was silent for a moment, and suddenly smiled. With His Royal Highness the Crown Prince here, no one can bully him. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 442. It has been busy since the beginning of the 12th lunar month last year. On the 25th day of the 12th lunar month, the second batch of grain and grass was ready, and Fukang personally escorted it to the border. With the advent of New Year's Eve, the first good news sent from the border was a New Year's gift from Qi Ling to the Queen. The army of northern Xinjiang was forced to retreat 2,000 miles. Defeated. The ministers of Ziki were in great spirits, and the palace banquet on New Year's Eve was more lively than in previous years. Fukang Guobayo was not present at the banquet, and Her Majesty the Queen was not in a good mood. Halfway through the palace banquet, Chu Qinghuang thought of Duan Muyu, who was imprisoned in the palace, and casually raised her fingers. Yuan Bao. Yuan Bao stepped forward quickly and bowed his head respectfully. Your Majesty. Go and invite Emperor Duan Mu over. Yes. Only him is invited, Chu Qinghuang confessed. No one else is allowed to follow. I don't want to go on a killing spree in the palace tonight, New Year's Eve. Slave understands. So Yuan Bao stepped down from the high platform and said to Chu Xuanyi, who was on duty, Your Majesty has a decree to invite Emperor Duan Mu to come alone to attend the New Year's Eve palace banquet. Chu Xuanyi nodded and turned around to invite Duan Muyu. Duan Muyu, who had been imprisoned in the palace for several months, became much more haggard during this period, and his whole person looked much gloomier. For half a year, he regretted almost all the time, regretting that he had only brought a few dozen masters with him. Be around. If he had brought more people, he wouldn't be in this situation. Of course, regret is just his personal emotion. In addition to regret, Duan Muyu also developed a strong hatred for Chu Qinghuang. He made countless plans to conquer Ziki in his heart every day, vowing to avenge this revenge. You can't take this tone. From being trapped in the hot summer to the cold winter, he was like an anxious beast. He lost his temper every day. However, except for the masters from northern Xinjiang who followed him, the people from the Ziki palace were only responsible for sending one person to the hospital for 1 day every day. 3 meals a day, ignoring his temper and complaints. Over time, Duan Wu even thought that he would be trapped and die here. So when he saw Chu Xuanyi walking in with someone, he said to him, "Tonight, New Year's Eve, Your Majesty invites Emperor Duanmu to attend the New Year's Eve banquet." Duanmu almost thought he heard wrongly. After being stunned for a while, he finally spoke as if to confirm, "New Year's Eve palace banquet." Chu Xuanyi nodded. "Chu Qinghuang invited me over." Chu Xuanyi's expression paused slightly, but he still nodded. "Only Emperor Duanmu is invited, no one else can be brought." Duanmuyu's face changed slightly, and then he sneered, "What? Your Majesty the Queen is worried that the masters around me will assassinate her. On New Year's Eve, Her Majesty the Queen and the ministers are staying up late, and the palace banquet tonight is very lively." Chu Xuanyi said lightly, "Your Majesty just doesn't want any accidents to happen, let alone see blood on the occasion of the New Year." Duanmu had a worried look on his face, especially when he heard the words "the palace banquet is very lively tonight." No matter how he thought about it, he felt that something was wrong, and there was an ominous premonition in his heart, as if something big and uneasy was about to happen. Similar. After being silent for a while, he didn't say anything. He knew in his heart that he probably couldn't get anything out of Chu Xuanyi's mouth. Anyone who has been trapped for half a year will long for a little freedom. What's more, he is the king of a country. Duanmu stood up and said, "I'll change my clothes. The clothes Emperor Duanmu is wearing are quite good. There is no need to change them specially." Chu Xuanyi looked at the other party's brocade robe and said, "My queen, I don't pay attention to these things." Duanmuyu's face couldn't help but darken again, and he said coldly, "In that case, just lead the way." Chu Xuanyi turned around and walked out, followed by Duanmu. In the palace garden, many masters from northern Xinjiang stared at Chu Xuanyi with cold eyes and murderous intent, as if they were waiting to take action at any time. There are many shadow guards outside this palace. Even if you are lucky enough to defeat me, you will never be able to escape from this palace wall." Chu Xuanyi warned calmly. Emperor Duanmu does not have many masters around him. If it is on New Year's Eve, if the night is damaged a little more, I'm afraid it will be even more difficult to move forward. After these words fell, the masters were obviously wary. Duanmuyu's expression became a little more ugly, and he waved coldly to signal them to retreat. Then he followed Chu Xuanyi towards the lively royal garden. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 443. When we arrived at the royal garden, we could hear the melodious music of elegant music in the distance. The palace dancers were dancing to the music, and the palace banquet was in full swing. The atmosphere was high and the emperor and his ministers were enjoying themselves together, as if a prosperous era was being performed. Duanmu paused for a moment, and his eyes fell on the joyful palace banquet. He looked at the faces of everyone at the banquet, which were glowing red, with high spirits, and their expressions became more and more gloomy. Then he walked towards the direction of the throne in silence without saying a word. Your Majesty the Queen Duanmu stood in front of the throne, raising his eyes slightly and squinting at Chu Qing Huang. The annual New Year's Eve is here. I would like to congratulate Ziki on its growing strength, and wish Her Majesty the Queen peace in the future. Chu Qing Huang raised his hand and signaled, Emperor Duanmu, please sit down. Thank you, Your Majesty the Queen. The reason why Emperor Duanmu came here today is actually for two things. First, Emperor Duanmu has been staying in Ziki for nearly half a year. Today is New Year's Eve. As the host, I should invite His Majesty the Emperor to stay with me. Chu Qing Huang said, holding up the wine glass in front of him, I would like to give a toast to Emperor Duanmu. When Duanmu heard this, his expression cracked for a moment. Half a year? What a shame she dared to say that. Her Majesty the Queen is the first person in ancient and modern times to imprison me, the king of a country, in Ziki for half a year. He said coldly, Your Majesty is not afraid of the revenge of the Northwest Frontier Cavalry. This is the second thing I want to say tonight. Chu Qing Huang sighed quietly. At the beginning of the 12th month of the year, His Royal Highness the Prince of Northern Xinjiang led his cavalry to attack the border of Ziki. I had no choice but to I can order the border commanders to fight the enemy vigorously, but I am not an arrogant person. Naturally, I know that the national strength of Ziki is still far behind that of Northern Xinjiang, so I have no choice but to join forces with Zhou to form an alliance. What? Duanmu's expression froze and he slowly raised his head, as if he couldn't believe it. What did Your Majesty just say? Last night, I just received a victory report. Chu Qing Huang ordered the battle report to be sent to Duanmu for review. Qi Ling is indeed my appointed border general. He did not disappoint me at all. He won the battle in the first battle. We have suffered a big loss in northern Xinjiang. Now we have broken through the border defenses and captured the city 2,000 miles away in northern Xinjiang. I think I should share this good news with Emperor Duanmu. Duanmu's face turned pale, and he stared blankly at Yuan Bao trotting down the wooden ladder. He excitedly handed the battle report to him, as if telling him some good news. Please take a closer look at it, and identify its authenticity. Please don't mistakenly think that this is a forged battle report by Her Majesty the Queen. It was like a bolt from the blue, making him dizzy. Duanmu stared at the battle report in front of him, unable to regain his consciousness for a long time. His eyes were as terrifying as staring at the god of death seeking his life. Emperor Duanmu Yuan Bao reminded him and said kindly, Do you need me to read it to you? Although I don't know much about reading, but... Duanmu grabbed the battle report. His face was sullen, veins popped out on his forehead, and he stared at every word on the battle report. As those words came into view, the color on his face faded little by little, and his whole figure seemed to have been deprived of life, numb and confused, unable to believe what had happened. Northern Xinjiang was defeated. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. This battle report is false. Duanmu raised his head and stared at Chu Qing Huang with sinister eyes. Her Majesty the Queen just said that the Crown Prince only sent out troops at the beginning of the 12th lunar month 2 years ago. Even if Ziki counterattacked immediately, it would only be less than a month ago. How could the good news come so quickly? Could it be that the northern Xinjiang cavalry was defeated so easily when they sent troops? Chu Qing Huang took a sip of wine and said, Emperor Duanmu is right. Duanmu's face was gloomy. But the Emperor of northern Xinjiang probably didn't know that in the past few months before northern Xinjiang sent troops, it was the time when the morale of Qi Ling's soldiers was the highest and their combat effectiveness was the strongest, because I asked Qi Ling to replace the best weapons for the soldiers. Chu Qing Huang smiled faintly, with a strategizing and intimidating look on his face. After I ascended the throne, the national treasury was empty, and the millions of taels of silver gained from confiscating the house were all used on military supplies. I borrowed another 10 million taels of silver from Dongling. Because military training is urgent and cannot be delayed. As he spoke, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you really think that I won't guard against your wolfish ambitions? Duan Muyu froze on the seat, his face pale and stunned, as if he had been struck by lightning. Ziki has the advantages of time, location, and people, so how can it not win the beauty? Qi Ling should probably thank the Prince of Northern Xinjiang for sending troops at the right time. Chu Qinghuang smiled, picked up the wine cup. Here's another toast to Emperor Duan Mu. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 444. Duan Muyu lost control and kicked over the tea table in front of him. The music suddenly stopped. The dancing girls panicked and all stepped aside. You've gone too far. Chu Qinghuang, you've gone too far. Duan Muyu stood up and pointed at Chu Qinghuang angrily. You did it on purpose. You imprisoned me on purpose and took this opportunity to force Northern Xinjiang to send troops. Only Ziki has its a legitimate opportunity to conquer northern territory. You are so ambitious. The ministers of Ziki saw that the king of a country was so out of character, almost without grace, like a hysterical trapped animal. Not only did they not feel angry or uneasy at all, but they suddenly felt a sense of pride and superiority that a powerful country is proud of. Northern Xinjiang, which once had strong cavalry, has now become a defeated general under 11 Qi. How can they not feel proud of this? This is their country. When a country is strong, other countries dare not underestimate it. When a country is weak, there are always people who want to bully it. After a brief silence, Chu Qinghuang put down the wine cup and waved lightly. You all stand down. The court dancers and musicians bowed and left. Chu Qinghuang's eyes fell on the face of Duan Muyu, who was out of control. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised with a hint of ridicule. You were clearly the one who provoked me first, but now you want to bite me in the face of the thief. You. Emperor Duanmu has been plotting against other countries since he was young, trying to annex the world and satisfy your ambitions. Chu Qinghuang spoke calmly, stating the facts sentence by sentence. However, he failed to succeed when he was young, and now he has been on the throne for 20 years. I am more than a year old, and I don't care about the welfare of the people of my country. Instead, I set my sights on the seemingly weak 11 Qi. Do you think I am a weak woman who seems to be particularly easy to bully? Duan Muyu's face turned livid. You are spitting blood. I went to Dongling to borrow money. You and Wei Hong quietly followed me to Dongling, right? You want to find out the relationship between me and Dongling. Chu Qinghuang sneered. It's a pity to disappoint you. I have no interest in following you. You met face to face, and I returned to Ziki after borrowing the money, just to make you confused and unable to make accurate judgments. Duan Muyu stood stiffly, without any reaction. I thought that without seeing me, you would go back to northern Xinjiang after celebrating the birthday of Emperor Dongling. Who would have expected that you would follow me quietly to Ziki again? This is really like stepping into the palace of the King of Hell. The King of Hell will not. I feel a little sorry for all your hard work in keeping you here, Chu Qinghuang said, and asked seriously, is there no more spies in northern Xinjiang, so the king of the country needs to take action himself? Duan Muyu closed his eyes. It turned out that her whereabouts had been under the control of Chu Qinghuang since Dongling. She watched his jokes calmly, and even quietly laid a dragnet, waiting for him to fall into the trap. Just a cunning damn fox. Damn it! Damn it! Duan Muyu regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. This year is the New Year's Eve of the first year of Emperor Huang. I and all my subjects will stay up late and wish the Western Qi dynasty a prosperous future. Chu Qinghuang stood up and raised a glass of wine towards Mianbei. I respect the border and fight bloody battles to protect our family soldiers who defend the country. The atmosphere is lively and noisy tonight. The ministers were high-spirited and enthusiastic. They stood up with wine cups at the same time, we respect the soldiers who fought bloody battles at the border to protect their homes and country. Honor your Majesty the Queen, who is wise, powerful, and wise. Honor the Western Qi dynasty when it was prosperous, and the country lasted forever. Honor God, may God protect Ziki, make the country strong and the people healthy. Glass after glass of fine wine was served, and heroic words of praise were shouted out one after another, igniting the boiling atmosphere on New Year's Eve. Duan Muyu stood in the middle of the banquet, his face pale and gloomy, and his embarrassment and despair set off the high-spirited and passionate mood of the Western Qi monarchs and ministers tonight. He stared gloomily at Chu Qinghuang's bright and moving face. This violent woman, who was once said to have no brains, unexpectedly defeated several princes with strong backing in a way that no one expected. Became the 95th emperor of the Western Qi dynasty. Duan Muyu once thought that her ascension to the throne was an opportunity for northern Xinjiang, but he never expected that northern Xinjiang would be completely defeated in her hands. Oh, that's right. Chu Qinghuang seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He waved his hand to signal the ministers to quiet down, then turned to look at Duan Muyu. Northern Xinjiang provoked first. If I don't fight back, people will think that Ziki is good bullying. I want to fight to the death with northern Xinjiang, but the national power of Ziki is not strong enough for me to think that I can easily annex northern Xinjiang, so I made an ally to carve up the territory of northern Xinjiang. Duan Muyu was shocked. Ziki and Zhou have joined forces. Does northern Xinjiang have room to fight back? After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 445. The ministers of Ziki were completely proud of themselves. After Chu Qinghuang ascended the throne, they lived in fear every day, and were afraid that the queen would catch them every day in the court. However, today they suddenly had the idea that having such a queen is actually not bad, especially since the always tough emperor of northern frontier was defeated in Ziki, and the ambitious northern frontier iron cavalry fell in the hands of General Qi, and tasted defeat in a miserable way, which made the ministers of Ziki feel that this year was really cool. There has never been a moment when they shouted in their hearts so sincerely, "Her Majesty is mighty." At this moment, this sentence is absolutely not flattering. Although they will still be afraid and uneasy in the future, they will still be trembling with fear, and even inevitably have some greed and hatred for Her Majesty. But at least at this moment, their mood is really very comfortable. Unprecedented comfort. As for what the northern frontier Emperor Duan Muyu was feeling, it was not in their consideration. After midnight, the brilliant fireworks exploded in the night sky, bringing the most joyous moment of the year. After midnight, the new year has arrived, and the brilliant fireworks in the sky seem to foreshadow the prosperity of the coming year. After the palace banquet, Chu Qinghuang announced, "You don't have to go to the palace to pay your respects and New Year's greetings early tomorrow morning. During the New Year holidays, you can spend more time with your family, respect your parents, treat your wife and children well, accumulate the reputation of filial sons and grandsons, and strive to be a loyal and filial person. Long live our emperor, long live, long live." All the ministers took their leave, and Duan Muyu was naturally sent back to his residence. Chu Qinghuang walked alone on the corridor of the imperial garden, followed by Yuanbao, Minjiao, and Jinlan. Red lanterns were hung high on both sides of the corridor, and there was a festive atmosphere. The air still had the smell of fireworks. The lights were bright and prosperity was beginning to emerge. Yuanbao asked respectfully, "Your Majesty, are you going back to Changming Palace?" Chu Qinghuang said calmly, "I'll go first." "Your Majesty." At the other end of the corridor, Chen Hai came quickly and saluted respectfully. "Just now, news came from outside the palace that concubine Duan wanted to see your Majesty, but the palace gate has been locked and concubine Duan can't get in." This New Year's Eve is a day for Chu Qinghuang to share joy with the ministers, not a family banquet. Chu Qinghuang did not order anyone to invite the Queen Mother and concubine Duan to the banquet. Although she and concubine Duan are nominally mother and daughter, they are unwilling to maintain even the most basic appearance between them. Neither the queen mother nor concubine Duan wants to see her, so Chu Qinghuang naturally has no need to create unhappiness for herself. Hearing Chen Hai's words at this time, Chu Qinghuang's face was not surprised, but she said calmly, "It's late, wait until dawn before leaving the palace. Tomorrow morning, ask the imperial kitchen to make more dumplings, pack some for me, and I will take them to the Xianwang mansion." Yes. Chu Qinghuang quickly returned to Changming Palace to rest. People who practice martial arts are used to getting up early, and since Fukang was not around, Chu Qinghuang had no reason to stay in bed. After getting up, she washed and changed her clothes, and then took Yuanbao, Jinlan, and Minjiao out of the palace to the Xianwang mansion. The palace servants carried the royal food boxes, which were filled with steamed dumplings of various flavors. Hearing the words "Her Majesty has arrived," people knelt on the ground inside and outside the Xianwang mansion. Chu Tianzheng, who used to be arrogant and shouted that Chu Qinghuang was an ungrateful person, also knelt on the ground to welcome the emperor. Concubine Duan was the only one who did not need to salute. She stood at the gate, looking at Chu Qinghuang calmly. Since the new emperor ascended the throne, the mother and daughter had met very few times, and they had almost nothing to say every time they met. But the coldness hidden deep in her eyes always existed. "I haven't maintained the mother-daughter relationship with the concubine for a long time," Chu Qinghuang said lightly. "I was bored in the palace, so I came to see how the concubine was doing recently." This sentence. Concubine Duan had a gloomy expression, but she restrained her emotions. She had lived outside the palace for more than a year, and her temper had been worn out. She used to face the concubines in the palace, but now she faces the ladies of the major families. The noble ladies who used to be respectful to her and the female relatives who had to greet her with courtesy now look at her with meaningful eyes, as if they are laughing at her, the concubine, who can't even coax her own daughter. From the past glory and favor to the current downfall and loss of power, everything is because of Chu Qinghuang. If the Ling family is still there, how could she end up in such a situation? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 446. This daughter was born to conquer her. Concubine Duan looked at Chu Qinghuang calmly and said calmly, "I just have something to say to you." Chu Qinghuang walked towards the palace and asked, "How have you been spending this time, the concubine? There should be nothing wrong with you. There are so many unhappy things. If I were to tell them in detail, I might not be able to finish them in 3 days and 3 nights." Princess Duan said coldly, "Your Majesty is busy with government affairs, so I'm afraid you don't have much time to listen to my ramblings." Something trivial. Chu Tianzheng followed behind, staring at Chu Qinghuang's back, his eyes full of resentment. Chu Qinghuang hummed, "There really isn't much time. If Fukang wasn't in the palace, she would be bored by herself and wouldn't even have time to visit Prince Yen's palace. But what can be done? It's the New Year's Day recently, and all the ministers have gone home for the holidays. She, the king of a country, can't be immersed in government affairs on New Year's Eve and New Year, can she?" Concubine Duan clenched her hands tightly, subconsciously wanting to make a sarcastic comment, but felt it was unnecessary. Countless facts have proven that offending Chu Qinghuang is not good for her, not to mention there are some things she still wants to find out. Entering the main hall of the palace, the servants were busy setting up tables and chairs. Chu Qinghuang sat down on the main seat. The palace attendants put the imperial food box on the table and took out plates of steamed dumplings that were still warm. There are all kinds of flavors, take whatever you want. Concubine Duan looked at the dazzling array of dumplings in front of her and thought of the cooks preparing them in Prince Yen's kitchen. She smiled faintly and said, "Your Majesty even brought the dumplings here personally. Prince Yen's palace is really busy." Chu Qinghuang didn't know whether he understood what she meant, and said in a calm tone, "I have a special status, so I have to be vigilant at all times. After all, Ziki has just begun to get better under my governance. If I go out, what an accident, the consequences would be unimaginable." Concubine Duan's expression froze, and then she said calmly, "Your Majesty said, it is always right to be careful. Is Her Majesty the Queen so afraid of death?" Chu Tianzhang sneered, "If you are so afraid of death, you should stay in the palace and don't come out. Maybe you will encounter an assassin again. Tianzhang Princess Duan shouted sternly, "Shut up." Chu Tianzhang gave Chu Qinghuang a cold look and shut up bitterly. "Prince Yan, it is better to be cautious in your words and deeds." Yuan Bao frowned, "Although Her Majesty the Queen is kind, Prince Yan offended Her Majesty the Queen in front of everyone, which is the following crime. According to the rules, he will be pulled down and slapped." Chu Tianzhen's expression changed, and he pointed at Yuan Bao. "You, a cheap slave, are the following criminals. Do you have the right to speak here?" "Tianzheng," Concubine Duan's voice increased, "don't be so presumptuous." Chu Qinghuang frowned, "Today is the New Year's Day. It is not appropriate to be stained with blood. Pull it down and slap your mouth for 20. Concubine Duan suddenly changed her color. "Qinghuang, it is extremely disrespectful to call Her Majesty the Queen by her first name." "Please be careful, Princess Duan," Yuan Bao reminded. Concubine Duan's face turned green and blue, and finally she lowered her face and said, "Tianzheng is Your Majesty's brother. Your Majesty has just said that today is the New Year's Day, and please, for the sake of brother and sister, please don't be the same as him." Chu Qinghuang took a dumpling and ate it without saying anything. Tianzheng Concubine Duan turned to look at Chu Tianzheng with a tough attitude. "I will apologize to Your Majesty." Chu Tianzheng glared at Chu Qinghuang fiercely, and reluctantly bent down to apologize. "It's my fault, please forgive me, Her Majesty the Queen." Chu Qinghuang glanced at him. King Xian probably still hasn't figured out what the superiority of kings and ministers is. "I don't care about you because I am tolerant and don't want to be on the same level with you. It doesn't mean that you can go beyond provocation without restraint and know no etiquette." Chu Tianzheng subconsciously wanted to sneer. "I killed a lot of people last year. This year I wanted to cultivate my moral character and become a tolerant king," Chu Qinghuang said in a cold tone, "but tolerance does not mean endless indulgence. If you dare to be presumptuous in front of me in the future, I will not forgive you by killing you. I can demote you to a commoner and let you experience the feeling of being stepped into a pit." Chu Tianzhen's expression froze, and he suddenly thought of Chu Tianqiu, who was still in prison. Chu Tianqiu was imprisoned in the Sky Prison, and his daughter-in-law, the former Princess Xian, became an ordinary civilian female family member after her husband lost power, and no longer enjoyed the honor and salary of the royal family. Now she is alone with her child. Although she is still living in the palace, what kind of life she is living is probably only known to the royal family members. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 447. No matter what Concubine Duan and her son were thinking, the breakfast ended peacefully. Chu Qinghuang didn't have a good temper before, but now that he is the king of a country, he naturally cannot be rudely offended by anyone. Anyone who dares to be disrespectful to the king is asking for trouble. It was probably the similar experiences of several princes that made Chu Tianzheng wary, and he finally learned to be respectful. However, being submissive does not mean that he can remain unharmed. After breakfast, concubine Duan stepped back and sat down on the chair next to Chu Qinghuang. She was silent for a while before speaking. During His Majesty's birthday banquet, the man pretending to be a servant followed King Ling. Who was the last person killed? Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows. Half a year had passed since her birthday party. Only now did Princess Duan think of clarifying this issue. Yuan Bao stood beside Her Majesty the Queen, Jinlan, and Minjiao stood respectfully aside. Concubine Duan could only dismiss the servants of Prince Yan's mansion. She had no right to use Chu Qinghuang's people. When they heard her ask this question, Minjiao and Jinlan had no reaction, but Yuan Bao couldn't help but look up at concubine Duan. At Her Majesty the Queen's birthday banquet, he stood not too far away and saw the man's true face, which indeed looked somewhat similar to Her Majesty the Queen. Someone discovered this at the beginning, but Her Majesty the Queen did not express her position. Who dared to raise suspicions without permission? His name is Wei Hung, the Prince of the Yan Kingdom, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. He colluded with the northern Xinjiang Emperor Duan Muyu. To be precise, he was controlled by the northern Xinjiang Emperor and intended to pay someone to assassinate me, but he can succeed. Concubine Duan sat up straight and closed her eyes. I heard someone mention his appearance that day. What's wrong with his appearance? Chu Qinghuang raised his eyes. The world is so vast and everyone has different faces. It's normal to occasionally see one or two people with similar looks or demeanor, but I heard the Queen Mother mention it before. Concubine Duan became nervous. What did the Queen Mother tell you? She said that Chu Tianzhen is not your biological son, nor is he my biological brother. Chu Qinghuang sighed. Of course I don't believe it. Although the concubine has no feelings for my daughter, she was very favored back then. I shouldn't do anything to disgrace my father. Concubine Duan's face turned pale without realizing it, and she stared at her blankly, her eyes full of shock. Tianzhen is not her son? Tianzhen is really not her son? Over the past few days, every time she looked at Tianzhen's face, she felt a strange feeling, and she could no longer be as close to him as before. Every night when she wakes up in the middle of the night, she always dreams that her son has been raped. However, she convinced herself again and again, but now, where is her son? Concubine Duan thought of Tianzhen's temperament over the years, his talent and temper, which were completely different from Chu Qinghuang's. They were like mud that couldn't be supported on the wall. On the other hand, Chu Qinghuang's martial arts skills were terrifyingly high, and his brute strength and cruel temper were unmatched. After all, they are not siblings. There is absolutely no trace of the Supreme Emperor in Tianzhen's appearance. Concubine, you don't have to think too much. The Queen Mother used to favor the concubine and her son. She will naturally find ways to provoke me in front of me. I won't take it to heart at all. Chu Qinghuang took a sip of tea and said in a calm voice, as long as Chu Tianzhen should not do anything he shouldn't do in the future, I will always keep his title of county king and his palace, so that he can live a more comfortable life than ordinary people, but he must also be content. After saying this, Chu Qinghuang suddenly thought of Duan Muyu, who was living quietly in the palace and never left the house. Speaking of which, that is the real Princess Duan's daughter. It's a pity that Duan Muyu has not even thought of meeting her mother for so long after arriving in Ziki. This shows that she has no feelings for her mother at all. If there is emotion, it is definitely hate and disgust. Thinking of this, Chu Qinghuang felt that there was no need to stay. The real daughter didn't care, so why did her fake daughter waste time on them? Yuan Bao. Chu Qinghuang stood up and said, "Go back to the palace." Yes, Yuan Bao responded respectfully and quickly turned around and said, "Your Majesty has a decree, please drive back to the palace." Chu Qinghuang walked out. Concubine Duan sat motionless, her expression stiff and pale, as if she had been greatly shocked. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 448. The news of the defeat in northern Xinjiang stimulated Duan Muyu. On the night of the second day of the Lunar New Year, the masters around him suddenly launched a night attack. They originally thought that the guards would be looser during the New Year holiday, and they chose to attack in the early morning when they were most likely to get sleepy. They did not think that they would be 100% successful, but they also thought that they could take a risk. Try. What if it succeeds? However, it turned out that they still underestimated Chu Qinghuang's determination to trap him, and Chu Xuanyi's strength in carrying out the imperial edict. The first batch of 6 masters were shot to death by random arrows before they could break through the gate of the Zuki Palace. The second batch of 6 masters followed, and there was a sound of weapons clashing, and the 6 masters were killed by arrows. Duan Muyu didn't always have many guards with him at all times, but now 12 of them were lost at once. He was so angry that his face turned green and white. Returning to the palace, he lost control and smashed all the tea sets and vases, kicked over stools, flower stands and tea tables. After venting his anger for a while, he was like a puppet that suddenly deflated, slumping on the chair in despair, sluggish, sad, helpless, like a dying beast. The New Year holiday passed quickly, and I went to court on the 6th day of the first lunar month and immersed myself in busy government affairs. After the New Year, there was no news for the time being. Chu Qinghuang summoned Wen Zhan and Chu Suans to discuss matters and learned that the preparations for food and grass were going smoothly. Neither the Ministry of War nor the Ministry of Household Affairs had caused trouble for them for the time being. So busy until the Lantern Festival. Without Fukang around, the Lantern Festival meant nothing to Chu Qinghuang. Apart from standing on the tower at night to watch the twinkling lanterns on the long street outside the palace, she had no interest in going out of the palace to play. However, she had no interest in leaving the palace, but someone had an idea for her. Today is the Lantern Festival. The Queen Mother has invited some noble ladies to have tea in the palace. Your Majesty, do you want to join in the fun? Chu Qinghuang was reviewing the memorial. When she heard Yuan Bao's words, she turned her head and glanced at him. Queen Mother. Yes, Yuan Bao nodded. When I went to pass the meal just now, Eunuch Chen told me about this, so I asked your Majesty what he meant. Who did the Queen Mother summon into the palace? Chu Yungyao, the young princess of Prince Rong's mansion, Chu Yungxian, the legitimate daughter of Prince Kang's mansion, Yu Jing'ai, the second granddaughter of Teifu Yu's family, and Wen Shang, the girl from the Wen family. Chu Qinghuang frowned and remained silent. Among these women, except for Wen Shang, the others seemed to have always been closer to the former Princess Xian, and they were all serious and well-known ladies. However, the situation has been somewhat different in the past 2 years. The Queen Mother summoned them obviously not just for tea. Teacher Yu's granddaughter must be quite old, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. Is there a good match for her? It shouldn't happen yet, Yuan Bao replied cautiously. Miss Yu has a distinguished family background, outstanding talents, and naturally has a first-class vision. Ordinary men are afraid that she will not be able to get into her eyes. I heard that the Yu family asked a matchmaker to arrange a marriage a few years ago. Intending to marry Miss Yu to Prince Yi of Prince Rong's mansion. Chu Qinghuang raised his eyebrows. Promise to Prince Rong's mansion. Tutor Yu's family already had a granddaughter who married into the royal family and became Princess Xian, but now she has lost power. Unexpectedly, another granddaughter fell in love with Prince Rong's palace. Yes, Yuan Bao nodded, but Prince Rong seems to have declined. Chu Qinghuang was silent. If it were the former Yu family, it would be considered a close match with Prince Rong's palace. After all, a prince's palace and a highly reputable tutor's palace are both well known and prominent. But today's Yu family, as long as King Rong has any brains, it is impossible to provoke them. This is probably the Queen Mother's idea. Chu Qinghuang closed the memorial, stood up and walked out. Chu Xuanyi is already a grown man. He should really consider his marriage. If he doesn't get married, the next two younger brothers will have to wait. Yuan Bao smiled respectfully and said, I heard that the three young masters of Prince Rong's family are now very popular candidates for husbands among the noble ladies of the imperial capital. On the list of the best husbands held by the matchmaker, Prince Yi ranks first. Chu Qinghuang was surprised, this one actually has a ranking. Yuan Bao nodded repeatedly, it has always been there. In that case, tell me. Chu Qinghuang became interested, who else is more popular? The top 3 young masters appointed by His Majesty last year are all among them. However, because Mr. Wen was once His Majesty's servant, no one has dared to make plans for him yet. However, some people have secretly inquired about Mr. Wen. No reply was given. Yuan Bao continued, Mr. Yun is not from a high family background, so most of the people who list him as the best husband candidate are from ordinary people's families, or some official families that have lost power, and they can barely be considered a good match. Yun Heng was a man of great fame, and his future would be unlimited. If those families who had lost power married their daughters to him, they would at least have some effect on their career. In short, everyone has their own calculations. After all, there are only a few marriages where two people are happy, and most of them are the combination of family and family. The lanterns are hung high in the corridor, which is full of joy. Yuan Bao followed His Majesty, like the third aunt or sixth grandmother in the household, and kept talking. Young Master Yu in Taifu's mansion used to be even more popular than Prince Yi. Some people even placed bets on which girl would be lucky enough to marry Yu family, but this matter is over now. Back then, alongside the Yu family was the former Qin uncle's house. Young Master Yu and Young Master Qin were the men admired by many girls in their boudoirs, but the Qin family has become a thing of the past, so there is no need to mention it again. Chu Qinghuang hummed, you know quite a lot. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 449. Yuan Bao smiled awkwardly, I heard this from others. Some eunuchs and maids in charge of purchasing in the palace often heard these things outside the palace. Whose man is the best and whose girl is both talented and beautiful are the topics that gossips in the streets are most interested in. Chu Qinghuang hummed, and saw Chu Xuanyi coming over not far away, and his footsteps paused slightly. Your Majesty. Chu Xuanyi saluted. Yuan Bao and I were talking about you just now. Chu Qinghuang smiled faintly, you are not young anymore, didn't the emperor's uncle and aunt urge you to get married? Chu Xuanyi was slightly stunned, get married? He pondered Chu Qinghuang's words and replied respectfully, I have no intention of getting married for the time being. Don't think too much, I have no other intention. Chu Qinghuang walked slowly, men should get married when they are old enough, and women should get married when they are old enough. Just get married and find someone who suits you. Chu Xuanyi said, Your Majesty has been on the throne for some time. The ministers urge Your Majesty to select the best candidates every now and then. Does Your Majesty have any ideas? No ideas. Chu Qinghuang said, I have someone I like, and I will get married when the time comes. Chu Xuanyi was silent for a moment, just one. What else? Chu Qinghuang raised her eyebrows, I am determined to be a wise empress, but I don't have so much time and energy to deal with men. Chu Xuanyi's expression was subtle. Although Chu Qinghuang did not put her mind on men after she ascended the throne, the many servants in the former princess's mansion were not fake, so why did she suddenly become pure and unselfish? Although it is normal for the emperor to have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, and men in this world are used to having 3 wives and 4 concubines, most of them are philandering. If you really love someone, everything he does will make you happy, and every word he says will make you feel good. One such person is enough. Chu Qinghuang smiled faintly, when there are too many people, someone is bound to be sad. The last sentence makes a lot of sense. Chu Xuanyi nodded slowly. If it is just for the sake of interests or greed for beauty, it is not too much, but love is indeed a matter between two people. When there are too many people, it will be chaotic and someone is bound to be sad. No matter whether it is the emperor's concubines or the aristocratic families, there are many examples of resentment due to love. Chu Xuanyi understands that what she said makes sense. He was just a little surprised. Unexpectedly, Chu Qinghuang, in addition to being wise and intelligent in government affairs, also has such a thorough understanding of love. It is really not like the princess who took a handsome man into the backyard when she saw him. Thinking of the past, Chu Xuanyi just felt like it was an absurd dream. Or maybe he would rather believe that those rumors were all rumors deliberately created by the outside world to discredit Chu Qinghuang. But these are no longer important. Chu Xuanyi was silent for a long time. The Yu family had asked someone to talk about marriage before. Yu family, Chu Qinghuang glanced at him, Yu Jing'ai. Yet Chu Xuanyi nodded, father didn't agree. It's right not to agree. Miss Yu is not suitable to marry into the Rongwang mansion, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. The queen mother's son Chu Tianqiu has lost power, and the former princess Xian has become a commoner. What is the Yu family's intention to marry into the Rongwang mansion at this time? Prince Rong should know it in his heart. Chu Xuanyi nodded slowly. Regardless of whether there is a relationship with Princess Xian, he will not be involved with the girl from the Yu family. Two sisters from the same family married into the royal family, and the people they married were still in different positions. If you are not careful, you will get into trouble. With the empress ascending the throne, Chu Xuanyi was given important positions. Chu Xuans won the first place in the imperial examination, and even the most dissolute Chu Xuanyi performed well in the military camp. The Rong Palace is now more prominent than before, and the marriage of descendants must be handled with great care. The wife they want to marry does not need to have a prominent family background, and they do not need to pay too much attention to her family background. As long as she is decent, it will be fine. What is important is that she has a clean background, and the woman is virtuous and calm, and does not cause trouble. Of course, under such a premise, it would be better if you can meet someone you really like. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 450. In addition to the young princess of the Rong Palace, the young lady of the Kong Palace, and Yu Jing'ai of the Yu Palace, the Empress Dowager also invited the young lady Qi Shu of the Minister of War, the young lady Yu of the Cabinet, and the young lady Wen Shang of the Minister of Revenue. The reason why Wen Shang was invited was not only because her father was in charge of the Ministry of Revenue, but also because her second brother was currently a favorite of the emperor. However, for the noble ladies present, the Empress Dowager was not a high-ranking figure now. Although she was the Empress Dowager, her son was in prison and had been demoted to a commoner. Even her mother's family, the Qin Kuaju mansion, was implicated and had no room for recovery. Now the Empress Dowager was only an empty title and had no power. So her move to invite the noble ladies to the palace was actually superfluous. The daughters of officials were not all simple and easy to fool. They could listen to or not listen to the words of the Empress Dowager who had no real power. Chu Qinghuang naturally didn't care about these. As she approached the Xi'an Palace garden, she saw a young man standing in the plum forest from afar. He was wearing flowing white clothes, had a graceful temperament, and a handsome and elegant profile, especially against the background of the plum blossoms blooming on the branches. He looked even more cold and noble, and had a melancholy temperament, like the snow lotus of Tianshan Mountain. Chu Qinghuang stopped and asked casually, "Whose son is that?" Chu Xuanyi raised his eyes and looked at him, "Yu Kaiubai, the son of the Yu family." Yuan Bao frowned, with hidden worries in his heart. His Majesty wouldn't fall in love with him, right? It was unreasonable for him to appear here at this time, and men were not allowed to enter the harem without permission. Even if the Queen Mother invited him, it would not be appropriate. The Yu family had ulterior motives. The Queen Mother invited Miss Yu to the palace for tea. This young Master Yu came to the palace on the pretext of protecting his sister, and the Queen Mother allowed it. Chu Xuanyi explained, "The Queen Mother and the ladies are having tea in the palace, and he can move around within the scope allowed by the imperial guards." Yu Kaiubai, Chu Qinghuang walked up to the warm pavilion in the garden and sat down. "Yuan Bao, go and call him over." Yuan Bao took the order, "Yes." The palace servants who followed him closely hurried forward to set up teacups and fruit plates and pour tea for His Majesty. Chu Qinghuang took a sip of the teacup and smiled faintly. There are only so many methods in the palace, and the Queen Mother is naturally proficient in this. Chu Xuanyi was silent. It seemed that Her Majesty the Queen had already understood the Queen Mother's mind. The inner court of the palace has never lacked methods and schemes since ancient times. Sending beauties to the emperor, creating various coincidences, and causing visual surprises will have a great chance of entering the harem. It is common for an emperor to have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. One more or one less does not affect anything. Who knows, one of them may be favored by the emperor and become the most useful chess piece. But no matter how natural things are, there will inevitably be times when you miscalculate. Yu Kaiubai walked over with his eyebrows lowered and eyes closed, looking like a nobleman. He entered the warm pavilion, respectfully and elegantly lifted his robe and knelt down, with extra courtesy. "I, the humble minister Yu Kaiubai, pay my respects to Her Majesty. Long live Her Majesty." Yu Kaiubai. "Yes." Her Majesty's voice sounded cold and majestic, "Raise your head." As a son of a noble family, Yu Kaiubai was born with a good upbringing and rules, and he had the pride of being the grandson of the Taifu mansion. He has always been very different from other sons of noble families in the imperial capital, and he has kept a proper distance from the princes. Even though a granddaughter of the Taifu mansion married the then King Xian, Yu Kaiubai did not get too close to King Xian. As for the princess, there was no intersection at all. Before the empress ascended the throne, Yu Kaiubai and Chu Qinghuang had not even had any formal contact, and all he knew about her came from the casual conversations of scholars after dinner. At this moment, this kind of thing was obviously a bit embarrassing for him, not because of the embarrassment of unequal status, but because his pride as the grandson of a noble family was crushed, and he was the one who was crushed, which made him feel ashamed. Raising his head slightly, Yu Kaiubai lowered his eyes and looked at the table legs in front of him, maintaining a respectful attitude and a little bit of stubbornness that he was unwilling to give up. The young master of the Yu family has always been a recluse who has devoted himself to learning. It is rare to see such an outstanding man today. Chu Qinghuang took a sip of tea and said in a light voice, "Are you waiting here on purpose?" Yu Kaiubai's face flushed, and then turned pale. "I didn't." "Nothing." Chu Qinghuang raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you follow the Queen Mother's wishes and wait here on purpose?" An embarrassing heat swept over him, and Yu Kaiubai's face was hot. For a moment, he was speechless and felt ashamed. His ambition was to be the top scholar in the imperial examination 3 years later, not to serve the emperor in the harem with his beauty, but the expectations of his family, his sister's tears, and the pressure from the Queen Mother, made him breathless. What Yu Kaiubai wanted to do most at this time was to get up and leave, rather than face the humiliation here, but he knew clearly in his heart that this humiliation was not brought to him by others, but he brought it upon himself.